So, welcome to the Center for Coaching and Organizations Growth Ring event for September 21st, 2023, about ritual in coaching. And before I get into introducing our wonderful, I could call her speaker, presenter, convener, facilitator, coach, wizard, and energy medicine gal, I could call her all sorts of things, but mostly I love to call her my friend. But before we get into introducing Michelle, I just want to tell you a little bit for those who may be watching and may not know that the Center for Coaching and Organizations is a 5013C nonprofit, C3 nonprofit. Let's get that correct. We've been around for several years and we do a whole array of things, one of which is Executive Coaching and Organizations Coach Training Program. We're kicking off another cohort in March of 2024. So if you're interested in that, please be in touch with us anytime. We also have other events, including Coaching and Organizations Global Summit that will be happening this April. And that is an event that gathers speakers and thought leaders from around the world and coaches, leaders, community members, all sorts of folks to talk about the value of coaching in organizations, aspects of coaching in organizations, aspects of human development, and what's going on in the DEIBJ space, and all sorts of wonderful things. And you get to network as well as listen and contribute with the speakers. So highly recommend it. If you're looking for some just great hanging out time, come join us for the CCO Community Connects. Folks who attend often use it as their own mini mastermind group because we basically talk about whatever shows up in the space. And the next one, if I remember right, is happening this Monday. So if you look at the event page on the CCO website, you will find that and find the link right there. The other thing that we offer as a support to continued learning and community are these Growth Ring learning events, which happen about every 2 to 3 months. Today's learning event, I just got really excited about the idea of ritual and coaching and how often we talk about a coach maybe needing to be almost invisible as a part of the coaching engagement. And yet how there are so many ways in which what coaches bring in frameworks and what clients respond to and lean into and open up to are things that are not so invisible. And one of them is ritual. And so when I thought about it, as I mentioned before we started recording, I immediately thought I was going to ask Michelle Burns, who is, if you want all the formal stuff, she is a CPCC, she is a PCC, she is a long-time seasoned coach and former member, very active member of the Minnesota ICF chapter, and all sorts of other things. She's also an energy medicine practitioner, and I've had just really the privilege, the blessing, and the growth and the healing that comes from working with Michelle in that energy medicine space. And she's into even more new things lately. But throughout all of that, she's found a use of ritual in coaching, certainly in the energy medicine practice. And I'm just delighted that she said yes to this. And we have been having the greatest conversations getting ready for this. So what I'm going to do is just turn it over to Michelle.
Thank you, Pam. Thank you. Thank you. And welcome, everyone. Thanks for showing up on today's conversation. And my intention for this really is for it to be, when Mariel jumped on the call, I said, I'm really going to be picking your brains. So I am so excited just to see how we all use ritual in what we do as coaches. And so as Bev mentioned, we've had great conversations leading up to today, and it really has sparked this like, oh my gosh, I use ritual in this way, and I use ritual in this way, and I use ritual in this way. So where I wanted to start is when you think about someone who uses ritual and what that evokes for you as you observe that ritual. So either you are a part of it or you're simply observing it. What does it evoke as far as this use of ritual? So everybody have something, kind of just show of hands. Okay. Michael too? Okay, thank you. All right, so now I'm wondering, how do you use ritual as a coach?
And you want us to think about that or respond?
I want you to think about it for a moment and simply notice, what does that evoke for you as a coach to include ritual? So
And for any,
now I'd love to hear.
and just one more thing for anybody who doesn't use coaching that much or is using coaching skills as opposed to being a coach, just put yourself in that leader mindset and that community mindset, in whatever mindset, as you answer these questions.
Thanks, Bob, for that distinction. So who'd like to start? What does it evoke? Mars, go for it.
Um, I think for me, it's really about creating the sacred container for whatever you're doing. It can be at the front end or the back end or in between where you drop those rituals in. And I think for me, it also, especially when I'm leading people in a grounding exercise at the beginning of a group, it takes me there too, because I can often be like spinning like the best of them coming into something. So it really helps me quiet and center and be clear about my intention, as well as inviting others to set their intention. So I use ritual a lot and I love ritual. So
Marcy, I actually thought of you this morning as I was getting my notes together and like, oh my gosh, how many different ways I've witnessed how you use ritual and how I've learned through it. So thanks. Sacred container. All right. Who's next? Who wants to go next? What does it evoke for you as a coach to use ritual?
So I all of the ways that ritual appears in my work as a coach were populated, and what evokes is to me a slowing down. And I mean, Marcy said it in more eloquent ways, the sacred container, but a coming together. There's a way of linking arms, in a way of building that connection and the common grounding. And Marcy already spoke to that as well. It also brings a sense of familiarity. So we participate in all kinds of rituals, and that, like, even in coaching, it brings a sense of familiar. This is part of how life works. This is how I say hello to you. Hello, how are you? I'm good. How are you? These are all rituals. But so even in coaching, for me, it evokes that sense of familiarity. And yes, here we are together again.
Thank you, Mary. Yeah, totally.
And what came up for me, Michelle, was maybe kind of oddly specific, but toward the end of the coaching sessions when we get to the commitment phase, and I'm smiling because I kind of enjoy this as clients, maybe who are new to coaching, kind of know this is coming, that then they'll start leading the ritual themselves sometimes. Like, I know where you're going, Andy. Yep. So here's my homework and whatever. Like, great. See, you don't even need me, but we all kind of get the ritual, and we're having fun, typically, and not always, but typically landing the plane by the end.
Hopefully.
Right.
So I hear the co-creation, or just like really it becomes a dance, is what I hear through your words, Andy. It's like, and sometimes you're leading it, but not all the time.
Yes.
Nice. Thank you.
Okay, I'll jump in behind Andy here. I'm not a formal coach, but I'm trying to learn more to use in other ways for presenting, facilitating, that sort of thing. But the image that comes to mind for me is, especially at the beginning or the ending, is creating some sort of ritual walks you over a threshold. And what I mean by that is, it's kind of like I can close the door to all the craziness out here. Now we're connecting, we've got this sacred space, and at the end, we're kind of like thank you, we're wrapping up, and now I'm going to step back in and take this with me. So I don't know if that visual makes sense, but it helps me distinguish that special space.
Thanks. Super powerful threshold. I love it. Like I had never, it's like, oh, the image of just crossing into and crossing back out of. Beautiful. Thank you.
I think for me, one of the things that it does is ritual can serve as an invitation for something that's bigger than anything else. It's like an invitation, I would say, to the universe to speak into the space, to support what we're up to. So in that way, that's the sacred space part of it. And actually, ritual also helps me embody good practice. You know, like Andy was speaking to closing out a session, or what Michael was saying about how we convene and open a space and then how we close the space. When the ritual to me also evokes the idea of something that is repeated and repeatable. And that because of that, it kind of gets into us. And I'm much less likely to forget to do it. So.
And Bev, you bring up, when we talk about the definition, it is an act that is repetitive, that is intentional. And the other distinction is how it creates meaning. And so Bev, like to that point of, it just kind of brings me to that best point, my best self of, this is how I show up as a coach. This is how, yeah. And Jim Early, are you still on with us? I want to pick his brain if he's right here, and if not.
And just for all y'all, I don't think Jim would mind me sharing that he's been recovering from COVID. So he said he would like to be present, but he's not sure exactly in what form or how fully he can be present today. So that may be,
Thanks,
he may be off taking care of a cough or a sniffle.
That's good. That's good. All right. So noticing what ritual evokes for you as a coach, and just already the richness that it brings into our coaching conversations. And when I asked you about a ritual in coaching, I put this inquiry to a number of coaching colleagues, and they're like, what do you mean by ritual? And I didn't get that question from a single one of you. So I was like, oh, they're advanced. They're so advanced. But as far as part of the inquiry into ritual in coaching, one of the things that I did was actually looked up the definition of ritual. And so there were a number of things that I want to read off and then ultimately land on, this is what I think we mean by ritual. A religious or solemn ceremony consisting of a series of actions performed to a prescribed order. A series of actions or type of behavior regularly and invariably followed by someone. An established form of ceremony, a system of rites, an act or series of acts regularly repeated in a set, precise manner. So as I consider the meaning of ritual and applying it in life and work, what I've landed on as the formal definition for today's conversation is that it is a regular, repetitive pattern that is intentional, that is meaningful, and it's distinct from routine. So it's in that act of whatever the ritual is to open our coaching or to set the stage before we even get into the coaching conversation. there's something about it's not just routine. And that's the distinction that I think that is like, ooh, even juicier as far as ritual goes. So another part of the definitions having to do with rights. And I thought, wow, in coaching, how many different rights are we exploring within that coaching relationship, that coaching conversation? So what are some examples of rights for you as a coach?
Well, Andy already acknowledged one of, what's the most important thing you're learning and how are you going to put that into action? That's one right. One of the rights that is part of every coaching interaction for me is, how do you want to use this time for you today? That's a right, like declaring a focus and an intention for this time. And then I don't know if you're asking this, but one of the rights that I take a stand for is client, this is your time just for you and nobody else. I don't use the word sacred, but this is your sacred time to be used in your highest, best way. And those are two of the front end rights that I use.
Oh, thanks, Mary. Anybody else?
Mary, what occurred to me when you said that, I appreciate both that it is sacred space. It can be sacred space, and you don't always use that wording. Speaking of words I would not typically use, but I think it was like this is holy ground. This 60, whatever time we have, this is holy ground, and it's we all know, first and foremost, I am here for you, and holding space and holding presence for it. So yeah, I'm just kind of sitting with that.
Yeah, I found myself having the first reaction of rights. What an interesting word, like rights. Huh? And then I started thinking, well, in coaching, our clients have a right to explore what they want to explore, not to be directed or forced into any pattern by their coach or anybody else. They have a right to confidentiality. They have a right to respect. They have a right, if we talk CTI language, not to be made wrong. And I'm finding myself going, I have to think about that a little more. It's just an interesting frame. Right.
And maybe a clarifying question for you, Michelle. Do you mean RIGHT or RITE or both?
Thank you.
Yes,
so that's exactly. I was like, oh, look where Bev went, and look where. Great, and it's like, oh, yes, and I actually, Andy, I was asking in the context of RITE, but Bev was like, oh my gosh. You just opened up a whole new dimension.
Well, and that was my thing was, right? I think I've been reading too much political discourse lately. That's exactly what clearly need to go to church.
Oh, thank you, Bev, for expanding it. I love it. Anyone else, as far as you consider rights within coaching, RITE or
RITC? Yes. So even the going to church reference reminded me that there are rights. They don't they're not the church rights, but they're in a coaching engagement. For me, I hold the foundation session and the completion session as separate from the coaching, and there are, I would say, guardrails to those conversations that aren't coaching that to me fit in this right as being a repeated pattern of behavior. The repeated pattern of behavior in the foundation session for me is really about establishing the goals, the purposes, and the umbrella of why are we in coaching? What is this for you? And there is a series of questions that I ask, not formally, like from a hymnal or a missal or whatever, right? But they're pretty much the same questions. And the same for the completion of a coaching engagement. I host a separate completion session, and the I categorize those rights as Yahoo, Boohoo, and Aha. That would be the script for that.
Love that. Love that.
But the purpose of that then is to review the engagement. What are the highlights? What are the celebrations? What are the lowlights? What are the challenging points? And what are the biggest takeaways? So I would say I mean, I haven't thought about them as rights, but they kind of follow a formula.
Mm-hmm. Yahoo, Boohoo, and what was the last one, Mary?
Aha.
Thank you.
And
I thought it was yeehaw, but
Well,
Yahoo
it
and
could be
yeehaw are
yeehaw,
both the.
but it's more the learnings. And
Yeah.
feel free to steal that. That's not proprietary in any way.
Thank you.
Love
Right.
it. Love it.
All right. So anyone else have another perspective as far as rights when you think about rights as a coach?
Well, I think for me, the whole contracting conversation and actually signing an agreement about how we're going to work together is like a rite of passage into the relationship. And I'm sort of playing around with the idea that maybe alignment meetings, when I'm doing work with organizations that allow the time or are willing to participate or even require that the manager and the coach and the coachee meet together. I also think if you were thinking about group coaching or team coaching or facilitating groups, that there are ways, an absolute thing that I know Michael and I share is we always try to get the voice in the room as quickly as we can. All the voices in the room as quickly as we can. The way that you set up a space, the actual tangible things. In some ways, the way people set up their Zoom rooms when they're doing various activities. Yeah, some of those things come to mind too.
So rites of passage, rites of beginning, rites of completion, rites. So the other place that I went as far as rites, hello, Lynn Baskfield, is was thinking about the rites as a coach. Like, what are some of the rituals that you invest in just for yourself in advance of that coaching conversation? So as you consider, how do you ready yourself to bring your best self forward as a coach? What are some of the rituals that really enrich you as you ready for that coaching alliance? So go ahead.
I can pop in with one unless you wanted to finish the
yeah,
question.
No.
Yeah, so it's actually two, and it works for me both with individual coaching calls as well as group meetings. The kind of might seem goofy to some people ritual is I will pick a very high energy music. Andy has seen me do this getting ready to teach when we were in the St. Thomas room. I had Justin Timberlake's I Got a Feeling, and I would dance around the room. And part of that was that song, for some reason, just makes me happy, makes me want to embrace the world, be with people, whatever. But it also has enough energy that it helps run excess energy through me. So that allows me to be more grounded. And then I forgot the other one. So, I remember. No, I remember. I lied. I remember. The other one is that I ask for all the support in terms of useful outcomes and being of service to my client or clients or whoever I might be with. I ask that everything around me can help co-conspire to make that happen.
Beautiful. What a beautiful ask. Thanks. Who else? I'll just chime in. A couple of people that I asked, it's a practice of theirs to light a candle in advance of the coaching session, well in advance of the coaching session. And when I asked what that is for, like for them personally, it's like that I can be that I can be the light today, that I can be light, I can be the light in this alliance. And I thought that was such a beautiful ritual.
Yeah, very beautiful.
Others that you practice as a coach, other rituals to get ready, just like for you, super personally. Any
So
other?
super personally, taking time every day in nature. I mean, I do it now all the time. I don't really remember that the reason why is to connect with me so that I'm ready to do the work that I need to do. So I do it so often now that I forgot that that's one of my preps. And I get dressed for work every day. I get dressed, I put on my shoes, I put on my makeup, I brush my teeth, I get dressed for work every day so that when I step into my space, I am ready to work. I like the music. I'm going to be exploring that one. I like the asking for support. I'm going to be using that one. And I have a drawer full of candles. So, anyway, but those are some of the ones that I know that I do regularly and deliberately and intentionally.
Yeah.
So you're one
Mary,
of those rare people who can stand up and let the camera see all of you on Zoom.
wow,
Whoa.
I even
All
have
right.
shoes on.
Oh, and matching
Impressive.
shoes.
Bruce. Mary, I need to hear that today because my groundedness, as Michael has heard me say recently, I've realized I'm better when I'm grounded, and getting my butt outside helps me so much. And I'm not honestly in a routine of that yet. I tend to stay in my little music studio basement thing. But one thing that's going to help me, even when it gets colder, I'll see that my dear friend of mine got me a bonsai tree because
Aw.
he heard me when I said, "Oh, I want to make sure I get grounded, stay grounded. And by the way, winter's coming up. Poor me, blah, blah, blah."
Hmm.
And so he got me this bonsai tree. So even though that I hear they require work based on the 27-page manual I just read through, but
Oh,
it will be a way that I am committing, I guess, to you all now that I will stay grounded. And while it's nice, I'm going to get outside too. So thank you, Mary.
Good.
Andy, we might have to move you to an office with a window in it to keep
Yeah,
that bonsai tree
we might.
alive.
Michael knows we have his and hers offices, but mine has no windows. This is true.
I just want to
That
echo what Bev said too about the music. I found, so I was on public school board for 4 years up until last year, and I was chair for the last year. And it was kind of tumultuous in public education. But I found I had made myself a playlist to listen to on the way to these board meetings that I knew could be very stressful, so that it got me, I could shake off extra energy, but it also got me positive and uplifted. And my mom told me a few years ago that when I would get ready for high school, she would hear me play, I'm aging myself, a boom box in the bathroom, right? With my favorite upbeat music. And she never told me to turn it down. She knew I did that so I'd have the energy to show up better to my friends and teachers when I got to school. She said I told her that. I don't know. But maybe it's just something built in. You know, everybody's sort of got a few innate things that
right.
make them feel like, I don't know how many of you have seen, thank you for the boombox. How many of you have seen Ted Lasso? But okay. So when Rebecca was teaching people when she needed to feel stronger before she went into something, she makes herself really big in the mirror. And I just love that image too.
Beautiful. I haven't tried the mirror one.
oh, there actually
I
there's
love
a
that reminder.
whole TED talk about power poses and what happens with that. But Michelle, you had found somebody else uses a playlist.
Mm-hmm. Did you know, this is a fun fact that came from just investigating some of the stuff for today. Beyonce, 1 hour before each of her concerts, she has a special playlist, ritual playlist. She also has ritual stretches that she does an hour before. And as I was looking into the neuroscience of ritual, it was like, gosh, she's brilliant, because these rituals actually enhance our brain function. Imagine. So I have a quick something to read from what was it? Spirituality and Health. And the article was How Rituals Rewire Your Brain. Okay, we can claim rituals are sacred, public, symbolic performances, or private, mundane, daily activities. But the truth is that it's a fuzzy concept. That's an interesting quandary, since researchers from business psychology to neuroscience have shown that rituals have social, psychological, and even physiological effects on us, making us less anxious and more resilient. And this effect is measurable as far as brain, in fact, researchers from Harvard Business School found that performing a task we believe is a ritual can lower our heart rates, ease anxiety, and help us to perform better. And so as a coach, it's like, oh my goodness, what if we're doing this as a regular practice with our clients? Like, it really made me think, oh my goodness, I'm not using ritual enough.
I think it can be a really helpful thing to remind clients of that when they're going through a particularly painful or difficult time. It's like, what are the rituals in their life? Because sometimes we let go of them. And to bring those pieces back, because that will sustain people through grieving, through health issues, through any kind of traumatic event. The ritual is the piece that's the same, where everything else in the world feels different. So good point. Thanks for bringing that up.
I was thinking about it in the context of navigating change, just like the constancy of change. And ritual is that one piece that it's like, oh, I can count on this. I have some authority here. Like, in the midst of the chaos, in the midst of the changes. So Bev, you look like you're gonna.
Well, I just found myself thinking about cat boxes, which might surprise some of you, but it was prompted by what you read, Michelle, and then what Marcy said. And I was thinking about how when someone, I'll use me as an example, might be going through really, really tough times, that an everyday routine act, if performed with a sense of ritual, or if performed with intentionality, can become that kind of healing ritual, even cleaning a cat box. Because while I'm doing it, I can be thinking, and this too shall pass, one of someone I know's favorite sayings. And there are these wonderful, lovely beings around me who I love and love me back, who will be here regardless of this chaos and this tumult. And I show my love to them in part by giving them a clean litter box. So it's a little odd example, I know, but the general thing is just how something that is routine, if done with intentionality, might move from the routine to the ritual.
I'm so glad you clarified that, because I didn't want to have to get a cat box to get a ritual, but and in listening to you, Bev, what it reminded me of is when I had littles, so I had 3 kids that were less than 2 years apart about, and I remember that one of the rituals of every day was to stand at the kitchen window with my cup of coffee and just take in the sunrise, enjoy my sip of warm liquid, and be 100% present. And so that everyday ordinary moment, cleaning a cat box, having a cup of coffee, whatever, became a ritual or a rite that grounded me, that anchored me, that had me be present to what was important.
You know, and Mary, thanks for using the P word, because I think probably somebody else has used it already, but that's something I associate so much with ritual, is it both invites presence and requires presence.
And it also, well, okay, so this ties into the coaching, but it also, one of the biggest things that I learned when I first began studying the holistic energy medicine, the very first class, they talked about what are your rituals, what are your ceremonies. And the reason to include them was for the sake of that expanded perception, that expanded knowing that comes through getting out of our, our thinking mind, quote unquote. And, so speaking to that, Bev, it's like, I think that there's a certain aspect of ritual that expands presence beyond the capacities that we have. And it, as a coach, I believe that it expands, like it's for the client as well. But then there's also the like nature coming into it, or our community coming into it, or, so big, I guess I consider it ritual as a superpower that we coaches have, and leaders. I mean, coaches, leaders, it's a superpower. It enhances our capacity in all sorts of ways. Any other benefits as far as ritual that you think of?
I got one, but I've been talking a lot, so I'm happy to hear other voices.
I just think sometimes rituals are fun. So, I mean, we got the serious and we've got the meaning and we've got the intention, but sometimes they're just plain fun. I mean, even in your work, they can be fun.
Love that.
Have a fun, silly card deck that you could pull a card and have someone do something silly. My people, when I do work sessions, they love the angel cards. If I forget, they tell me. They're not huge, heavy, deep, profound things, but they're just this little bit of sparkle that they take into their work sessions. So I just think that rituals can bring fun and lightness and joy into anything.
And I love what I love about that. And actually, so Marcy and I have been friends for a long, long time, but in my mind's eye, Marcy is Miss Sparkles. She is like the embodiment of, you want something to have spark, invite Marcy, because there's going to be such cool rituals involved as far as imagery, as far as cards, as far as inquiries, as far as art, as far as, so thanks for weaving that aspect of it into this conversation, Mars.
Yeah, it made me think of one particular deck on your site, and now I'm not remembering. It's not the shift. What's it called? The long, narrow ones? You're on mute, hon.
That's the shift deck. Yep,
Yeah.
there it is. Mary Oak has it.
Oh,
Yes,
Mary's got
they're,
it.
they're hysterical.
If you ever need to lighten your own mood before a coaching session, draw one of those cards and do what it says.
Shall I draw one for us?
Yes, draw one for us.
Please do.
First, you have to learn how to open the box. And this card is express what you want to say with a 1-minute interpretive dance. Everybody ready?
Everybody all at once.
There we go.
Ritual.
Let's do it. So I just made salsa so I could do my salsa dance, right?
Yes.
Keep going. You got 30 seconds.
Yeah, we're only
Minute is a
halfway
long
through.
time.
It's gotta have me, sorry, sound too.
Wish
It
we had
didn't say
music.
silent, did it, Mary?
Almost, you're almost done.
uh,
And you can give up if you want to. Nobody says you have to do it.
Ooh, right.
Oh, that was great.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful.
And
Thanks for having
listen,
that deck right on hand.
yeah, and I can't remember whether it was Baryshnikov who did that wonderful ballet and contemporary dance with a chair. And that's what Andy was doing.
That was super creative. All right,
Yeah.
so Beth, what else were you gonna say?
Oh, I was just going to ask if Jim took himself onto video because he wanted to add in here and join in the interpretive dance.
Did I miss something?
Oh, yeah.
Well, I deliberately missed that, by the way. I'm going back to the question you were asking, Michelle, about the value of ritual or something like that. And because I've missed a lot of this, you may have all said this already. But one of the things that strikes me is it brings a significance to the experience. Like, this isn't an everyday garden variety thing. This is something special, or at least it
Yeah.
can be.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
so
Yes.
true.
And I'm curious, like in the group, how your clients, like the feedback that you've received from clients as far as the use of ritual or that significance. So I'm gonna lead, but I'm please be thinking about this. There was a coaching group that I led a number of years ago, and every time we'd get into the group, everyone was so frazzled and so stressed, and they were coming from all sorts of different departments, et cetera, et cetera. And so we co-created a ritual to begin that coaching alliance. So every week when we'd come together, we co-created this ritual of this is how we get to be together in this coaching alliance. And to this day, that crew, they go out and do things socially. They didn't do anything at work like together prior to that. But in the co-creation of the ritual, they had a heck of a lot of fun. They found out how much, they loved each other, and that significant relationship has just, built from there. Okay, I don't remember what I asked you.
What feedback from clients about
There
ritual?
we go. Thank you, Mary. Where was I going with this? So the feedback from those clients is that it actually, that process changed their life. And I'm not kidding you. It changed their life as far as who they are when they show up to a meeting, but also who they are for other people. So, okay. Now, feedback from your clients, please.
I can think of one person right off the top of my head that one of the things I typically do as a rite or a ritual is that I do a midpoint review kind of thing. Bye, Marcy.
Bye, Mercy. Thanks.
And one of the pieces of feedback from that session was, you slow me down, or this slows me down. And I was doing that on purpose. Like, I do now have a ritual of how I welcome people into the space, but it for me in my head, it's to make that transition to walk across the threshold, as Michael said earlier. But that was the feedback from one client, is it slows me down in a good way.
This might not sound like feedback, but it really was important feedback to me. And it's happened with one or two clients. And honestly, I'm embarrassed to say I don't remember what it was that they were referring to. But the feedback was in terms of, aren't you going to? Because I had skipped it
Hmm.
in the interest of time or in the interest of something. And so it showed me there was an impact because they noticed the absence and they wanted it back.
Qualitatively, the space was different. Nice. Thanks.
I'm reminding of what Andy talked about how when you come to the end of the session and the client says, "Oh, I know what you're gonna ask me next."
Yeah.
In some ways, that feedback is, we are partners. You know, we are a partner in this process, and I get that oftentimes. I get a similar response when at the point at which I say, how do you want to use your time today? And 2 of 1, everybody says, I knew you were going to ask me that. And I have no idea what to talk about.
Yes, it doesn't mean they come prepared, but they knew you were going to ask.
Mhm. Yeah. So, any other insights as far as client feedback on the impact of ritual that
Well,
you just, what?
yeah, I'm going to mention one that isn't about coaching. It is about group facilitation. I learned from this wonderful Honeyweller back ages ago when I first joined the organization, which would have been in the 80s, I think. Could that be? Of course it could.
40 years ago? Yeah.
Yeah. And
Amir.
orientation, everybody had to go to orientation. And Emily, I got there early because I didn't want to be late, first event thing, and she came right over to where I was sitting and introduced herself and had this lovely chat with me. And I watched her do that with 3, 4, 5, 6 people until people were coming in droves. And afterwards I said, thank you so much. I felt so, welcomed and whatever. And she ended up saying, well, I do that for me as much as I do it for you, because it gives me that relationship. And I know that I can look to you and we will feel connected. And so it's become a ritual for me when I'm doing group facilitation to go up and welcome people, and maybe even to be at the door, not be fussing up at the front with a slide deck, for God's sake, or something else. And then also that thing that I was talking about that Michael and I both attend to, and I'm sure the rest of you do too, where you plan something that gets voices into the room, and maybe even something that lets everybody in the room know who else is in the room. Because even if they're all from the same company, they don't necessarily know, well, like what levels, how long have you been here? And so some of those rituals, people have told me, I felt safer because you did that. So I know that's an impact, is an enhanced feeling of safety and therefore perhaps an enhanced sense of being able to relax into the learning or the conversation or whatever it might be.
Bev, you've expanded my imagination thinking about facilitating or meeting rituals. And I'm thinking of the company I was at for 4 years, United Health Group. And one of the habits of a couple of the leaders there when they'd start a meeting is they'd just right away say, I want to start with gratitude.
Oh.
And they'd list, a couple of people, a team, whatever it was, but they'd always start with that. And I was just hearing more about this lately, and it's been on my mind and heart around, somebody said, like, gratitude is like the mother of all, virtues, to be able to do that. And, Mary, a lot of the stuff you publish or some of the things you publish are about gratitude. And I've just been really thinking about that lately, and what a beautiful way to get people in that space right away of gratitude, especially if you're a senior leader, instead of, uh-oh, is the boss going to be pissed off about something today or whatever? Well, let's start with gratitude.
Oh, that's lovely. That
Andy,
made me
that's
think
perfect
of
for today. Today
Yeah.
is Global Gratitude Day.
That's right. Mary, subconsciously, that's probably why I said it, because I saw your email this morning. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, when I was doing some work for Cargill, my internal co-facilitator, I was the external. The internal, some of you may know Jack Bandy. Jack would always start these sessions with high-level leaders saying, so what did you notice about safety? Because safety was such a core value for Cargill, safety of employees, safety of assets, safety of customers, vendors, communities, whatever. And I loved that because it reinforced the cultural value. It took it off the wall and made it real. But also that if you're thinking about safety, you tend to think beyond yourself.
Mm.
And that always felt like that changed the space a little bit.
There's a certain resonance, I think, between Andy, this talking about the gratitude and just that inquiry, Bev. There's something about the resonance that's created within that space. And the other word for me, as I think about it, is that the group is harmonizing. So it's a silent harmonization, and not necessarily silent either, and it's like getting it into the space. So beautiful. Anything else? Jim, anything that's popping for you? You look like you're noodling over there.
Well, I'm a pretty much non-ritual guy as far as I'm conscious of anyway. But I've got a client who's a superintendent of a school district, and every week he meets with his administration team, which are principals and assistant principals. I think it's a 3-hour meeting, and they always start with, I don't know if you'd call it centering or, your personal check-in. Those have gone up to 2 hours. And he never cuts those short. And the superintendent is probably the most team-oriented human being I've ever met. And one of the outcomes of that is this rural district is now a magnet for teachers. So when he has an opening, instead of having no applicants and having a hard time finding people like the district used to face, he's got people with 10 years experience applying.
How cool is that?
Testimony.
Yeah.
Which is an enormous advantage for them.
Sure.
Yeah. And isn't that interesting? Because I bet one of the farthest things I know one of the farthest things from my mind, and I'm going to hazard a guess from all of our minds, was that the benefits of ritual could be not monetized.
I don't know. The Catholic Church has been doing it for thousands of years.
Brilliantly.
Truth, Mary.
I've got
Right.
some scapular medals if anyone would like to buy one, by the way.
Thanks, Jim. I'm first in line.
Oh my.
All right. So any other,
Oh, just
When
one
you
more
think of-
thing. Lynn's popped in via chat, and she said, I love ritual. With the horses, she does, for those of you who don't know, she does equine assisted coaching. So she has a partner who's a horse, or maybe several horses, in the coaching. And she said, with the horses, we often just stand and breathe before entering the pasture. I also use cards and imagery. I love that Ruth Godfrey did before every story, and that is start with a story. Sorry to be silent today. A lot going on here at the house, so must be on mute. Oops, before every coaching session, she says. Love what Ruth Godfrey does before every coaching session is that start with a story. Thanks, Lynn.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you, Lynn. And to piggyback on ritual and Lynn as an equine coach, there is such power in that practice of simply breathing with the horse. And it reminds me, it's like, well, how often do we breathe with our clients?
Yeah.
Like, oh, what's possible from that place?
That's actually a ritual I've started in the last 3 years with my clients, is starting with, well, some of you know PQ practices or PQ rep, but more importantly, the rhythm of breath. And I just learned from the heart math people that slowing down your breath slows down your heart rate. So it's like, oh, that's why we get grounded then, because we're slowing down our heart rate. That would explain the physiology of that practice.
Another ritual I know from working with Lynn, in fact, I just got the chance to work with her in the past probably month, 6 weeks. Time flies, so, but it was recent. And she starts with a card deck that has these beautiful, beautiful illustrations of horses, and then has what I would call sort of a horse medicine message. And so you make the deck your own in terms of energy, and then you draw a card from anywhere in the deck. And she holds space for just really being with the image first. Because I'm always flipping over to read the words. She says, no, go back to the image. And I'm like, good message. And then being with that and seeing what that evokes, and then turning and seeing what the words may or may not evoke. And one of the things that does for me is it's a ritual of reminding me the power of reflection and of, Mary, to your point, slowing down and noticing what has a chance to emerge or come in when we do slow down and open up. Yeah, Lynn's really good with ritual.
My gosh, very powerful. And having had a session with Lynn around the same time as Bev, what that just conjured for me, Bev, is also in that ritual space, there's a remembrance that's possible. And it's like, oh my goodness, I used to know that. And I guess I still do. Like, that there's a, yeah, so, yeah.
And that brought me back to Marcy's comment about when clients are going through stuff, the client or the coach having an inquiry and asking them about things reminds them of things they do on a regular basis that can bring back in that stability. And that speaks to what you just said, Michelle, is when we're in those states, we often forget what we already know and probably what we already teach or use with other people, but we're in the thick of it and it's just gone.
Right. So anything else that's bubbling up as far as ritual and this whole topic for you?
Well, I've got one thing, Michelle. I think cards can be inappropriately used sometimes. By the way, this is a joke, so just don't get freaked out.
Okay.
Bear with me. The first Christmas when Wendy and I were living together, we're going to be hosting Christmas, so we're getting the house together and cleaned up, and somehow she had the idea that we should draw an angel card. And I drew a card that I didn't think had any business being in an angel card deck. And the word was obedience. So I started following my instructions. Christmas went really well then.
That's funny.
That's a true story.
Thank you, universe, right?
Those angels.
Sneaky little things.
Yep.
All right. So one of the pieces that in this conversation as far as ritual is well, I wrote down a number of questions, but let's see if we covered most of them. Where you use it, how you use it, what's the impact? All right. Now, how haven't you used ritual that you might?
I know I want to use music. Go ahead, Bev.
No, go for it, Mary.
No, just that it's like that. I've been aware that that's been a missing just in my life, but it's like, oh, well, I could like start with something simple like getting ready for work. I could use it. So,
Yeah, for me, I definitely want to bring in something about nature because my last 10 days with my sisters was spent almost entirely outside hiking and wandering around northern Minnesota. And it was very clear to me I felt better, I looked better, I thought better, I just lots of things were better. And how much I enjoy it, how easy it is for me, Andy, like you, to be in my little space and hardly ever get out of it, except to clean a cat box, maybe, or feed a cat. We do these, or medicate a cat, or something about a cat. But the other thing I'm thinking about is I I want to explore. I'm not going to make a commitment to actually do something, but I'd love to hear what you all might do in this regard. To have something I do after a session, whether it's a coaching session or whatever. If I'm co-facilitating, like when Mary and I were leading a coaching circle for the ECHO program when it was at UST, we would debrief. That was a ritual, a routine, or whatever. And it always slowed me down, centered me, and have had me leaving with a time to have celebrated, to actually checked in and found out that I really hadn't fallen quite as flatly on my face, or that, yeah, she had whatever. But I don't have a ritual after my coaching sessions these days, unless I have another person involved, like it's more of a group work and I've got a co-lead. And I'm thinking that could be really, really useful. And I'm curious what the rest of you do, whether, Michael, it's something you do after you're teaching a class, or for the coaches, what you do after your individual or group coaching sessions. What are your rituals for that? Can I steal some? Or should I share a
Honestly,
list if I end up finding some?
yes, please. That sounds good. And I'll just mention the other thing that is coming up for me, something you mentioned, Mary, about as I processed it, thinking of here's a coaching engagement and the difference, the specialness, the ritual of the first one and the last one. And as you said that earlier, I was just thinking, yeah, I kind of do that stuff, but I don't want to just kind of do it. Like there's something more. I want to turn those more into a right. So I'm just noodling on that as I've just started a client or two and I'm preparing to end one. How can I make those special and a ritual?
I don't have an answer to your question, Bev, but I can tell you what strikes me about this confronting question, Michelle. Like I said, I'm kind of a non-ritual guy. And I remember hearing a coach 25 years ago talk about how before he meets with a client, and he would meet with clients in a 4-season gazebo detached from his home. And he just offhand mentioned raking the rug and preparing the water. And it sounded like something a priest would do, frankly, who had a shag rug, by the way. And I'm sure that in doing that, he was preparing himself as well as the rug and the water. And at a minimum, I should have something that I'm doing. I mean, my head is generally in a good place, but to have it deliberately in a better place. And then also, it sure makes sense to have something afterwards. And for me, that might be just blocking out time where I just have even 10 minutes where I make notes regarding what I want to follow up on out of the conversation. You know, just that.
Yeah, I'm going to read what Lynn put in the chat. She says, before a workshop, I always ask my volunteer assistants to bring an intention for what they want to get out of volunteering. Afterwards, we come back to that and see what volunteers actually came away with, expected or unexpected. Another thing we do is read the evals from the participants together, each person taking a few to read out loud to the others.
The rate of completion, a rate of landing the learning too in that. One of the things that I was considering, and this sparked it, what you just shared as far as what Lynn offered, is I was curious about the ritual as it pertains to the ICF competencies. So does anybody else go in that tangent at all? As far as, because I was like, oh my goodness, it means this one and this one. And so for what that's worth. And in the ICF competencies, I don't know if there is something about completion, like, well, what haven't you added within your, the way that you coach that might be included now as far as ritual. So
I can speak to that a little bit, Michelle, because in coaching presence, it's one of the competencies that they can't assess within a recording, because coaching presence, I think it's coaching presence, actually includes the practices that coaches use to make them ready to be a vessel for the coaching. So that would play in there. I think another place that ritual plays into is the establishes trust and safety, because we've all spoken to how it can bring people together, can establish a space and hold a space and acknowledge, for instance, confidentiality or something like that, that gives that sense of predictability, that can have people feel safer. And there is an actual behavioral marker around the coach asking or inviting the client to say how they want to close the session, how they want to complete the session. And that reminds me that I do often say, what else do we need for you to feel complete? And that is both a routine and a ritual.
Beautiful. Thanks. I had a hunch you'd be able to tie it in a little more solidly with the with the ICF competencies, Bob. Thank you.
Yeah, I've been spending a little more time with those puppies lately.
All right. So, Andy, is there anything else that you wanted to share?
No, I'm feeling pretty complete on this. Thank you, Michelle.
Yes. So in that vein of completion, I listened to a podcast a couple weeks ago with Kristen Tippett on the On Being podcast, and with the current Attorney General, Vivek Murthy. Vivek Murthy. And I thought in this context of completion, one of the things that he was talking about was, as a nation, navigating change and the constancy of change and the stress and the chaos, and like, what are some of the remedies? And he tied it into what he does every day to complete his day. And I just thought, oh my gosh, this is right in alignment with us. So he suggests 4 simple things to do to settle our nervous system down in times of crisis, times of change, he saves a meditation, a podcast, or something that has been inspiring, like music, playlist, whatever. And he participates in 15 minutes of one of those at the end of every single day in order to set the stage for completion. But speaking to where you were going, Andy, on that gratitude practice, he said for him, it also anchors the day in a tone of gratitude. So, and I was like, well, what a cool ritual that is. So I leave with that inquiry of what haven't you included that might just evoke that much more richness as you complete your sessions, or yeah. So,
I just have to say that is my most important takeaway today, Michelle, because in general lately I've been feeling very discombobulated, and I've had to get up and walk out of my office to whatever's next. And this idea of close the day, anchor the day in a ritual that settles the energy but also emphasizes the gratitude, that it's like, oh, that's what I came here for.
Before other people chime in with something they might be taking away, because I love to have us end with Michelle understanding what sort of landed for you, I do want to pose the question that Lynn put in the chat, which: has anyone had a client that just stuck up their nose at doing a ritual? And I assume the following question is, what happened? What did you do? I have had a client or two, or maybe more than that, look askance at me or go, we're going to do what? And I have found that simply by saying, I'd like to invite you to try something, just see what happens. This big old experiment might not do anything. You might think it's the most ridiculous thing. It's probably going to sound woo-woo. I do all sorts of whatever. And then they'll do it. Now, they might inside be turning up their nose, or they might have turned up their nose at some part of me describing what we were going to do, but they usually do it. And probably the worst thing I've ever heard was, well, that wasn't as bad as I thought it would be, but I don't really want to do it again, thanks. So that would be my experience with the nose turned up. But at least they tried it, right?
Right.
Anybody else have an experience of someone being resistant or uncomfortable or anything else with ritual?
I don't know, 10 years ago, started introducing a provocative question right at the beginning of coaching before I asked, what did you want to do in coaching today? And deliberately, I chose a question that would bring people to their heart. Like, what are you most proud of today? What are you proud of in your week? What do you, a question like that. And I had a client push back on that hard, like, that question doesn't work for me. Yeah. I was like, okay, what question would work for you? What question would have you connect with your heart? And it's so funny because the question she chose is, what is delighting me? What is bringing delight? What is delighting me? And I had a coaching session with this client today. When I asked, what is delighting you today? What I'm most proud of.
Oh.
So
Beautiful.
Great. That's great.
But I would say in that story is this idea of lean into and dance, lean into the resistance. What's shaken? What's the challenge? Here's the purpose of the ritual. How do you want to get there?
Yeah, and stay
Partners.
unattached. Yeah.
Yeah, partners.
Yeah, I love the idea of leaning into the resistance. I mean, I'm thinking of a client who, in my clearly correct estimation, needed some breathing at the beginning, right? And I remember, suggesting that, and she's like, no, I don't need that. No, I'm going, okay, and what else, what do you want then? Or what else would you want? And that leaning into the resistance, I'm just savoring that phrase a little bit, Mary. And I'm thinking of another time where it wasn't really breathing, but a client was just so, managing the list of the to-do and whatever. They just said, I wonder what would happen if we just closed our eyes. And in that moment, like, that turned out to later be like the breakthrough moment for her to like get out of the stuff in the head and the whatever, and maybe get closer to her heart or whatever she was feeling. So like, I guess kind of doubling down on the leaning into the resistance. You never know what's going to work with what client at what time at what situation. So keep trying shit and see what sticks.
Yeah. Oh, and Lynn's got another thing in the chat. Lynn, thank you so much for participating in chat when you've got so much going on there. Coming back to core competencies of going with the client's agenda, their wholeness and resourcefulness, asking permission. Yeah. Yeah. And if the
Thank
client
you,
says
Lynn.
no, that's just fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I am curious, and Michelle, take it a different direction if you want, but as we're rounding out this session, I know Mary has said what a big takeaway was for her. And anyone else want to share something they're taking away, something that landed for them or is sticking? Is that okay, Michelle, with you if we go there?
Look, totally where I was going to go. So thanks, Bev.
As the currently non-coach in the room, in the sense of one-on-one, I will jump out to say that, first of all, thank you. This was just so enriching. I'm taking away the importance of being intentional in your rituals, really putting that thought into it and then sticking to it. And I am passionately curious to go and research more about ritual, because the research you started bringing in about how it changes your brain, about how it disposes you, my number one input strength in Strengths Finders is input, and I just can't wait till we're done so I can just start researching. So thank you for bringing the softer side and the data side. It was great.
Yay. Thank you.
Who else?
Well, it's for me, Michelle, it's Bev, it's a no-brainer. It's to start some ritual before a coaching session and end one or end it at least with a gathering of my thoughts so that those flighty things don't get lost.
You can start with shake the rug and prep the water, Jim.
Right. Shake the rug.
It was rake the rug.
Break, shake, whatever.
Something with the, actually, there's a book called something like, what is it? Chop wood, carry water.
Yeah.
Yeah. So shake rug.
Shake
Make-
booty, whatever.
Ah,
Shake something.
Yeah. And Lynn's weighed in here with ritual as a portal to remembering parts of self that can't be accessed in a linear, rational fashion. Yeah, well said. Ritual as a portal. Yeah. Thanks, Lynn. Andy,
I
did
think
we
for me,
hear
it's the two things. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, good. We're sensing the energy there, Bev. Thank you. Yeah, for me, I think it's two things. One is, very personally, the routine of groundedness, nature, besides my cute little bonsai tree, but getting myself in nature, not just waiting for the nature to come to me type of thing. So, yeah, leaning into that on a daily basis and a weekly basis, a ritual of that. And then secondly, what I mentioned before about the, with my clients, thinking of those bookends or those capstones of beginning the engagement and ending the engagement. So thank you, Michelle. Really thoughtful and helpful stuff.
Thank you.
And I'm kind of with Michael today. I'm really interested in reading that article on how ritual affects your brain or whatever that was from Spirituality and Health, Michelle. So if you have a link to that to drop into chat, or if you want to send one to me, I can send it to everybody.
I have 4 articles that I will send by email to you, Bev, to share with.
Great.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I also dropped Michelle's number into the chat. She said she'd be happy to hear from anybody on anything. And I just highly recommend it. I mean, lately she's been into plant medicine now too, and I've been learning so much from her. Did you know that that thing we hate so much, Creeping Charlie, is actually good for something? Who knew, huh? Who knew? Yeah. So, Michelle, anything you want to say before I round this out?
Just thank you for inviting me to be part of this conversation today. I learned lots, and I learned from all of you. Thank you. I have different words I'm taking away, threshold, blah, blah, blah. But ultimately, the one thing, Andy, you mentioned the word savor. And I think that that is one thing about this experience. Like, it has been savory. And that totally ties in with ritual, because it allows us that moment of savoring. So thank you all. Thank you, Bev. It's been an honor.
Well, thank you, Michelle. And one thing I'm taking away that I didn't mention before is just how smug I feel about having called Michelle. And when I thought about this topic, like, I'm so right. Which on occasion these days is nice to feel. Also, just how joyful it can be to have a group of learning inclined, heart inclined, head inclined, and spirit inclined folks together in conversation. So we will, as CCO, be putting on another session probably in January. And it might be very well having Andy and Michael Nelson talking about leadership coaching and the third thing, which I just love the third thing some. Also, if you aren't already getting what we call our regular-ish newsletter, you can sign up on the CCO website. And more than happy to have you all join in on Monday for the CCO Community Connects. Literally, you can bring any question, comment, topic. One time we spent the whole time talking about Will Smith smacking Chris Rock at the Oscars. And it was fascinating. It was fascinating where that went and all the depth of that conversation. Other times we've helped people with growing their practice or exploring who knows what. It's really quite amazing. It can be a breath of fresh air. At any rate, so we're going to end today just with another huge thank you to Michelle Burns, PCC, CPCC, energy medicine practitioner, and diva of all things ritual. And I wish you all a wonderful, wonderful month. And I hope to see you soon at another CCO event. Thank you, everyone. Bye for now.
Thank you.